I'm Rory, 29, standing just outside the gates of the Oakwood estate. Through the ivy, I watch my family toasting with vintage champagne on a lawn that I paid to restore. I wasn't invited. Instead, I'm watching via the security feed on my phone. The audio crackles. And then I hear my mother's voice, sharp and clear above the laughter. Don't worry about Rory. She tells the town gossip. She's just the wallet. She doesn't need to be here to be useful. That was the moment I decided to close the account. I stood just outside the wrought iron gates of the Oakwood estate, watching the party unfold through the gaps in the ivy. From a distance, it looked perfect. The lawn was manicured to a velvet green. The string lights were glowing in the twilight, and the guests were all wearing their finest summer linens. My parents, Cynthia and Richard, were holding court near the fountain, laughing with a group of local investors. My sister, Courtney, was posing for photos on the marble steps, holding a crystal flute of vintage champagne. I recognized the bottle. It was a 1996 Dom Perignon. I knew it because I bought it, just like I bought the marble steps she was standing on, the fountain my parents were leaning against, and the very gates that were now locked to keep me out. This was the grand reopening of our family's historic lake house, a celebration of legacy, restoration, and new beginnings. And I was the only member of the family not on the guest list. I didn't crash the party. I didn't scream or make a scene. I just pulled up the security feed on my phone. I still paid for the high-speed internet that was broadcasting their happiness to the world. So I figured I had a right to watch. The audio crackled through my earbuds. I heard the clinking of glasses, the murmur of polite conversation. And then, my mother's voice, sharp and clear above the noise. She was talking to Mrs. Abernathy, the town's biggest gossip. It is a shame Rory couldn't make it, Mrs. Abernathy said, looking around. Is she traveling for work again? My mother didn't even hesitate. She took a sip of the wine I paid for and smiled that tight, perfect smile she saves for public appearances. Oh, don't worry about Rory, she said, her voice dripping with casual dismissal. She is just the wallet. She doesn't need to be here to be useful. Besides, she is better off at work. It is the only thing she understands. Courtney laughed, a bright, tinkling sound that carried across the lawn. Exactly. Someone has to pay for all this, right? To the new mistress of Oakwood, she raised her glass. My father raised his. The whole party raised a toast to my sister, the new owner of the estate I had spent 5 years and over $500,000 restoring. I looked down at my phone. The image on the screen was crisp and high definition. I could see the sweat on my father's forehead. I could see the triumph in my sister's eyes. And I could see the exact moment my mother erased me from the family narrative with 7 words. She is just the wallet. The insult didn't hurt. That was the strange part. It didn't sting or burn. It just landed with a heavy, metallic thud, like a vault door closing. I turned off the feed. I put my phone in my pocket. I didn't cry. I didn't feel sad. I felt calibrated. They thought I was just a wallet? Fine. I would show them exactly what happens when the wallet snaps shut. Before I tell you exactly how I turned that champagne toast into their financial funeral, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? And have you ever felt like an ATM for your own family? I sat in my car, parked just down the road from the estate, and opened my laptop. The screen glowed in the darkness of the interior, the only light in my sudden, self-imposed exile. I logged into the family banking portal. I had set this up years ago to make things easier, to ensure bills were paid on time, to streamline the flow of money from my account to theirs. Now, I was about to dismantle it all. First, the mortgage. $3,200 a month. I found the recurring transfer, labeled renovation stipend, and hovered over the cancel button. My finger hesitated for a fraction of a second. A phantom limb twitch of the daughter who had spent her life trying to please them. But then I remembered my mother's voice. Just the wallet. I clicked. Cancelled. Next. The utilities. The Oakwood estate was a beast to heat and cool. Electricity. Water. Gas. All on autopay from my personal checking account. I went down the list, unlinking my bank information from each service provider. I didn't notify them. I didn't transfer the billing to my parents. I simply removed myself from the equation. Let them figure out how to keep the lights on when the next bill arrived unpaid. Then came the credit cards. I had given Courtney an emergency card years ago when she was in college. Emergency had apparently come to mean designer shoes, spa days, and, judging by the recent transactions, a significant portion of the catering bill for tonight's party. I logged into the credit card site and froze the card. Then I reported it lost. Just to be thorough. Finally, the country club dues. My father loved his golf. He loved the status of being a member at the most exclusive club in the county. He loved it almost as much as he loved not paying for it. I canceled the membership renewal. Effective immediately. It took less than 20 minutes. A digital massacre performed in total silence. No screaming. No fighting. Just the quiet click of a mouse and the soft tap of keys. I closed my laptop and leaned back in the seat. My heart was pounding. A steady, rhythmic thud against my ribs. I waited for the guilt to come. For the crushing weight of anxiety that usually accompanied any act of defiance against my family. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange, cold clarity. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I saw a woman I hadn't recognized in a long time. I wasn't the dutiful daughter anymore. I wasn't the family ATM. I was Rory, the crisis management consultant. I fixed disasters for a living. I handled hostile takeovers, corporate scandals, and public relations nightmares. I was good at my job. I was ruthless when I had to be. And for the first time, I was applying those skills to my own life. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A text from Courtney. "Where are you?" Mom is asking. "Don't be weird." I didn't reply. I didn't even unlock the phone. I just started the car and drove away, leaving the Oakwood estate and its celebrating ghosts behind in the rearview mirror. They were toasting to a future they couldn't afford, in a house they didn't own, paid for by a daughter they didn't respect. Let them enjoy the champagne. The hangover was going to be brutal. I drove until the city lights of Portland replaced the darkness of the countryside. My penthouse was quiet, sterile, and exactly what I needed. I poured myself a glass of water tap, not bottled, because even millionaires have limits, and sat down at my glass desk. I opened a file I had named The Ledger. It wasn't just a list of expenses. It was an autopsy of my relationship with my family. I scrolled through the columns, the numbers blurring into a single, nauseating figure. $542,000. That was the cost of my existence. Most people would ask why. Why would a successful, intelligent woman let herself be bled dry for half a decade? Why would I pay for a renovation I didn't want? For a sister who treated me like a servant? For parents who only called when the direct deposit was late? The answer wasn't simple. It was architectural. I wasn't born a sponsor. I was built one. It started when I was 7. I remembered bringing home a spelling test with a perfect score. My father, Richard, had barely looked up from his newspaper. But later that evening, when I found a $5 bill on the sidewalk and gave it to him, he had beamed. He had called me his good girl. He had told me I was valuable. That was the first brick in the wall. Over the years, the conditioning intensified. Love wasn't something given freely, it was something purchased. Affection was a transaction. If I wanted to be seen, I had to pay. If I wanted to be heard, I had to provide. By the time I was 25 and making my first six-figure salary, the wiring was complete. I didn't just give them money. I anticipated their needs before they even asked. I became addicted to the momentary hit of approval that came with every wire transfer. It was a sickness. A trap of normalizing cruelty that I had mistaken for duty. But tonight, looking at the sum total of my value, something snapped. I closed the spreadsheet and opened a new browser window. It was time for the forensic phase. I hired a private investigator, a man named Vance, who specialized in asset tracing. I sent him everything, the deed transfer I had found online, the bank statements, the emails. Then I dug deeper. I pulled up the loan documents my parents had submitted to the bank 3 years ago for the initial renovation loan. I still had access to their digital files because, of course, I was the one who organized them. I scanned the income declaration, and there it was. They had listed my monthly transfers, my gifts, my support as business income for a consulting firm that didn't exist. They had created a shell company, R&C Consulting, and claimed my personal transfers were client retainers. I sat back, the breath leaving my lungs in a rush. This wasn't just familial betrayal. This was bank fraud. They had used my money to lie to a federal institution, and because I had declared those same transfers as personal gifts on my own taxes, the discrepancy was a ticking time bomb. If I called it in, if I reclassified those payments as loans they had defaulted on, their income would vanish. The bank would investigate. The IRS would audit. They hadn't just built a house on my dime. They had built a prison cell. And they had handed me the key. The silence from the canceled transfers didn't last long. It was broken exactly 48 hours later. Not by an apology, but by a notification on my phone. It wasn't a text asking if I was okay. It wasn't my father asking why the renovation stipend hadn't cleared. It was a Facebook notification from my Aunt Linda. Rory. Honey, Courtney told us about your episode. We're all praying for you. Please don't let jealousy ruin your relationship with your sister. My episode. Jealousy. I didn't reply. I just logged onto Instagram. And there it was. The Whisper campaign. Courtney hadn't wasted a second. When the money stopped, she realized she couldn't control my bank account anymore. So she decided to control the narrative. She had posted a black and white photo of herself looking pensive by the lake, my lake, with a caption that was a masterclass in weaponized victimhood. Heartbroken when toxic family members try to dim your light just because they can't find their own shine. Mental health is so important. Guys, check on your strong friends. Even the ones who seem successful. Sometimes they're the most broken. It was brilliant. Really. In one paragraph, she had framed my financial boundary as a mental health crisis. She had turned my refusal to be exploited into a symptom of my own instability. The messages started pouring in from the extended family. Cousins asking if I was off my meds. Uncles suggesting I take a sabbatical. My parents played their part perfectly. 2. My mother left a voicemail that afternoon. Her voice was dripping with that fake, syrupy concern she used when she wanted an audience. Rory, Richard and I are so worried. We know you've been working hard. And maybe the stress is getting to you. But taking it out on Courtney? Cutting off her support just before her big day? It's cruel. Sweetheart, we know you're jealous that she's settling down at the estate while you're alone in the city. But don't punish her for your unhappiness. Call us. We can find you a therapist. I listened to the message twice. I saved it. Then I saved the screenshots of Courtney's posts. I saved the texts from the flying monkeys in our family tree. They were banking on my shame. They thought that if they painted me as the bitter, unstable spinster sister, I would be too embarrassed to show my face. They thought I would retreat into the shadows, restart the payments just to make the whispers stop, and apologize for my breakdown. They were projecting their own arrogance onto me. They assumed I cared about their opinion. I didn't care about their opinion. I cared about the paperwork sitting on my desk next to my laptop. It was IRS Form 211. The application for award for original information, otherwise known as the whistleblower complaint. I picked up my pen. I filled in the details of R&C Consulting. I attached the loan documents where they claimed my gifts were business revenue. I attached the bank statements proving those funds came from a personal account, not a client. I signed the bottom line. They wanted to talk about mental health? Fine. Let's see how their mental health holds up during a federal tax audit. I put the folder in my briefcase. The grand reopening party was tomorrow night. They hadn't uninvited me. Probably because they assumed I was too unstable to show up. They were right about one thing. I wasn't coming as a sister. I was coming as an auditor. And I was about to close the books. I arrived at the Oakwood estate at 8:15 p.m. The party was in full swing. The driveway was lined with luxury sedans and sports cars. A testament to the clientele my parents were so desperate to impress. I parked my modest sedan right next to a gleaming Bentley. The contrast deliberate. I checked my reflection one last time. No makeup to hide the exhaustion. No soft curls to soften the blow. Just a sharp blazer, tailored trousers, and the cold, hard look of someone who had run out of patience. I grabbed the folder from the passenger seat. The weight of it felt good in my hand. Solid. Real. The security guard at the gate hesitated. He recognized me. Of course. I was the one who signed his checks. Or rather, I used to be, Miss Rory, he said, shifting uncomfortably. Your mother said. I am sure she did. I interrupted. My voice calm but firm. But this isn't a social visit. Frank, it is business. And unless you want to explain to the IRS why you barred access to a federal whistleblower, I suggest you open the gate. He blinked, then stepped aside. I walked up the long, winding driveway, the gravel crunching beneath my heels like the sound of bones breaking. The party was a sea of pastel linens and forced laughter. My mother spotted me first. Her eyes widened, a flicker of genuine panic crossing her face before she masked it with a tight, brittle smile. She whispered something to my father, who turned, his face flushing a deep, angry red. They intercepted me near the champagne tower. What are you doing here? My father hissed, his voice low enough not to disturb the guests, but loud enough for me to hear the venom. We told you not to come. You are unstable. I am perfectly stable. Richard, I said, not bothering with Dad. I am just here to settle the bill. Don't you dare. My mother whispered, her hand gripping my arm with surprising strength. Don't you dare ruin this for your sister. She deserves this night. Does she? I pulled my arm free. Does she deserve a house she didn't buy? A party she didn't pay for? A life built on fraud? Keep your voice down. Courtney appeared at my elbow, looking like a terrified porcelain doll. People are staring. Why are you so jealous? Why can't you just let me be happy? Because your happiness is stolen property, I said, my voice rising just enough to cut through the ambient chatter. And I am here to repossess it. I walked past them, ignoring their frantic whispers, and stepped up onto the small stage where a jazz band had been playing. I took the microphone from the startled singer. The feedback whined, a high-pitched screech that silenced the crowd instantly. Good evening, everyone, I said, my voice projecting clear and cold across the lawn. I am Rory. You might know me as the wallet, or maybe the sponsor. But tonight, I would like to introduce myself by my real title, the creditor. I signaled to the AV technician I had bribed earlier that afternoon. The screen behind me, which had been displaying a slideshow of Courtney's achievements, flickered and changed. The ledger appeared in bold, black letters. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I scrolled. Mortgage payments, $3,200 a month for 5 years. Total, $192,000. Renovation costs, marble floors. Custom cabinetry. Imported landscaping. Total, $215,000. Courtney's emergency credit card. Designer clothes. Vacations. This party. Total, $135,000. Grand total. I read the final number aloud, savoring every syllable. $542,000. The silence was absolute. My mother looked like she was about to faint. My father looked like he was about to explode. Courtney was crying. Actual tears this time. Her mascara running down her face in black streaks. "You are lying," my father shouted, finally finding his voice. "Those were gifts. You gave them to us." "Did I?" I asked. "Then why did you list them as business income on your loan application to Second National Bank?" The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a magic trick. "That is right," I said, holding up the folder. "I know about R&C Consulting. I know about the fraud. And I know you transferred the deed to this house to Courtney to hide the asset. It is over." "Richard." A deep voice boomed from the back of the crowd. Everyone turned. Grandfather George was standing there, leaning on his cane, his face a mask of disappointment. Grandfather George walked through the parting crowd like a battleship cutting through ice. He was 82 years old. But tonight, he looked like a titan. He stopped at the foot of the stage, his eyes fixed on my father. "Dad." My father stammered, his face pale. This is a misunderstanding. Rory is upset. She is making things up." "Is she?" George asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. He turned to the screen, reading the numbers I had projected. $542,000. "That sounds about right. I have been wondering how you afforded the marble when your consulting firm hasn't had a legitimate client in 3 years. "We have clients," my mother shrilled, her poise completely shattering. "R&C Consulting is a viable business. R&C Consulting is a shell," George said. "And the Oakwood estate?" Courtney stepped forward, clutching her pearls. "Grandpa, what are you talking about?" "Mom and Dad signed the deed over to me last week. It is my wedding gift." They signed a piece of paper. "Yes," George said, looking at my sister with a mixture of pity and disdain. "But they forgot who actually holds the title to this land." He turned to the crowd. "My son Richard seems to have forgotten that the Oakwood estate is held in a family trust. I am the sole trustee. No property transfer is valid without my signature." The gasp from the guests was audible. I watched the realization hit Courtney like a physical blow. She wasn't the mistress of anything. She was a squatter. But the lawyer said. My father started, sweating profusely. "Your lawyer is an idiot, Richard," George snapped. "Or maybe you lied to him, too. Either way, the transfer is null and void. This house belongs to the trust. And as trustee, I am evicting you." He pointed his cane at the door. "Effective, immediately. All of you. You have turned my legacy into a circus funded by the theft of my granddaughter's labor." He looked up at me on the stage. He didn't smile, this wasn't a happy occasion, but he nodded. A sharp, respectful nod of one CEO acknowledging another. "You were the only one who honored this family, Rory," he said, "by paying its debts." The room was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the untouched drinks. My parents were paralyzed. They had lost the house. They had lost their status. They had lost their narrative. But I wasn't done. I had one more document to deliver. I stepped down from the stage. The crowd parted for me, their eyes wide, terrified of being caught in the crossfire. I walked up to my father. He looked small now, deflated. like a balloon with a slow leak. "You can't do this," he whispered, his voice trembling. "We are your parents." "I know," I said. "That is why I am giving you a head start." I handed him the thick manila folder I had been carrying. It was heavy with the weight of consequences. "What is this?" he asked, staring at it like it was radioactive. "That," I said, "is a copy of the whistleblower complaint I filed with the IRS this morning. It details the tax fraud regarding R&C Consulting, the fraudulent loan applications to Second National, and the misclassification of my personal loans as business revenue." My mother let out a small, strangled sound and grabbed his arm to steady herself. "The audit usually takes about 6 weeks to initiate," I continued, my voice calm, professional, detached. "But since I provided them with such comprehensive evidence, including the bank transfers and your own emails admitting the scheme, they might move faster." I looked at Courtney, who was staring at the floor, her tears ruining her silk dress. "And Courtney," I added, "you are listed as an employee of R&C Consulting on the loan application to justify your income, which means you are an accessory to bank fraud. I would suggest you get a lawyer. A real one. Not one paid for with my credit card." I turned back to my father. "You have 30 days to pay me back the $542,000. If you do, I might withdraw my cooperation with the prosecution for the bank fraud." "But the IRS?" "That train has already left the station." I didn't wait for an answer. There was no answer to give. The math was done. The audit was closed. "Enjoy the party," I said. Then I turned and walked toward the exit. Grandfather George fell into step beside me, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the pavement. We walked out of the gates together, leaving the ruins of the Oakwood estate behind us. The champagne was warm, the ice had melted, and the bill had finally come due. The fallout wasn't a landslide, it was an implosion. Fast, and a disaster, and completely contained within the blast radius of their own greed. The IRS audit began 17 days later. My parents tried to blame their accountant, then each other, and finally, me. It didn't work. Federal agents don't care about family dynamics, they care about paper trails. And I had provided a highway. Second National Bank called in the renovation loan immediately upon discovering the fraudulent income statements. Without the cash flow to cover it, and with Grandfather George refusing to bail them out, my parents were forced to declare bankruptcy. The Oakwood estate is currently on the market. I hear the bank is having trouble selling it. Apparently, the marble steps I paid for are already cracking. Cheap installation. It figures. Courtney didn't get a lawyer. She couldn't afford one. She is currently living in a studio apartment smaller than my closet, working as a receptionist at a car dealership. Last I heard, she tells everyone who will listen that her jealous sister stole her inheritance. I didn't stick around to watch the debris settle. I changed my number. I changed my email. I moved into a penthouse in the city, one with a doorman who knows that my parents are on the do not admit list. 3 months later, I am sitting on my balcony, drinking coffee. It is Sunday morning. The city is waking up below me. There is a chair opposite me. It is empty. For a long time, I was terrified of that empty chair. Society tells us that an empty chair at the family table is a tragedy. It tells us that cutting off family leaves a void that can never be filled. A silence that will haunt you. But as I sit here, listening to the wind and the distant traffic, I realize that is a lie. That empty chair isn't a void. It is a luxury. That chair represents the absence of criticism. It represents the absence of being used. It represents the $3,200 a month that is now sitting in my investment account, growing for my future. It represents peace. I used to think my value was determined by how much space I could fill in their lives, by how much weight I could carry for them. I thought I was the foundation. But I wasn't the foundation. I was just the floor mat. Now, the ledger is balanced. The debt is written off. I am not lonely. I am solvent. I finish my coffee. I look at the empty chair one last time. And I smile. It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. If you are sitting in a chair, paid for by your own silence, maybe it is time to stand up. Share this story if you are ready to close your own ledger.